I met him on a wet afternoon in late September, the sort of day when the world looks rinsed and undecided. The bookstore smelled like paper and rain. I was staring at a tower of used paperbacks that leaned like a lopsided city when a copy slid off the top and smacked me on the shoulder. I flinched. A hand darted out and caught the book before it hit the floor. "Sorry," he said. "That was gravity's fault." I turned. He was tall in an honest way. His hair curled at his temple, not on purpose. His sweater was the soft gray of fog, and looked like someone had loved it long before he ever did. His eyes were a color I still cannot name. There was a half-smile in them that made me think of a song I used to know. I could not remember the melody. I still cannot forget the shape it made in the air between us. "You were the one who stacked these?" I asked. "Guilty," he said. "I always think I understand balance, right up to the moment when I do not." "Maybe try a shorter stack," I said. "That feels like giving up." We stood there in the quiet while the rain brushed the windows. The shop cat wove around his ankles like a soft idea. When the bell over the door jingled again, I realized we had been smiling at each other for a while. His name, he told me, was Theo. He was new in town. He was starting a job at the small historical museum up the street. He told me he had always wanted to live near the water but not the ocean, because oceans swallow too easily. Lakes hold things. Lakes remember. "My name is Mara," I said. "I work at the hospital night shift. I teach people to relearn how to move after their bodies forget." "That sounds like magic," he said. "It is mostly repetition," I said, "and patience. The magic is that people keep trying." He nodded as if this was a story he already knew. He bought the book that had fallen and one about weather and one about the history of maps. He hovered like he wanted to say more. I hovered like I wanted him to. Then he tucked the books under his arm and told me he would see me around. He was not flirting. He was gentle with the word around, as if it meant a circle we would both walk without making plans. I might have let him pass from my life like a face on a bus, if the town had been bigger. It was not. There were 2 decent coffee shops. There was one farmer's market. Everything else was a chain. He sat across from me the next morning at the coffee shop when a stranger asked to share my table. He was the stranger. He set his paper cup down, read the writing on it, and grinned. The barista had spelled his name, Theo. "It suits you," I said. He took a sip, winced at the heat, and said, I did not seem like someone who minded early mornings. He was wrong. I hated early mornings. That day I could not tell. His presence felt like the right time. We spent an hour trading small tokens. I told him I had lost my mother when I was 20, and kept a list of things I could not ask her, like which cut of meat to use for stew, and whether you should forgive someone who is not sorry. He told me his parents wrote letters to each other every Sunday for 30 years, even after they retired in the same house. He had a box full of their envelopes that smelled like old glue and lilies. Why lilies? I asked. My mother put the flowers on the table when she wrote, he said. They never died fast enough. The smell sunk into everything. He had moved to town, he said, because he was tired of cities that changed faster than he could, and because the river kept a steady pace as it emptied into the lake. The museum had hired him to curate a small exhibit about vanished neighborhoods, streets that were paved over, communities displaced when the highway came through. He wanted to find the names that were lost. He wanted to say them out loud. By the time the coffee was gone, we had built a bridge that felt steady enough to walk across. He stood and asked if I wanted to see the museum sometime. I said yes because I meant it. He wrote his number on a napkin. It bled through and left a faint ghost on the table below. He looked embarrassed and pleased. I felt a small, thrilling fear, the kind you get when you pass too close to a cliff and the air changes. What followed was not cinematic. It was a slow and careful opening. We met at the museum on his second week. He carried his keys like a promise. He showed me a room with high windows where sunlight sat like a quiet guest. He walked me through photographs of a street that once had a bakery and a barber and a seamstress, and 3 different neon signs that no one had bothered to remove when the shops closed. He touched glass like it was skin. I realized I had fallen for him the first time I watched him read a description card out loud. He spoke like the words were not facts but invitations. We learned how to live inside the same sentences. We wandered the farmer's market and argued about heirloom tomatoes. He said the green ones were misunderstood. I said they were suspicious. We sat on the public pier with paper cones of fries and let gulls stare us down. We borrowed books from each other and returned them slowly. He turned down the corners. I underlined. We were not perfect, but we were honest. Or we believed we were, which is not the same thing. In early winter, he started leaving his toothbrush at my apartment. He kept his sweater on the back of my kitchen chair. He brought tulips when the air was a hard blue. He fell asleep on my couch with his mouth open like a kid, and I had a small thought I did not say out loud. I wanted to keep this exact breath forever, not the idea of him, not the version you polish in your mind, but the ordinary fact of his arm over his eyes and his sock half off. We did not move in together. We did not make a timeline. We were both careful with planning, because we wanted to pretend our present was the plan. When my night shifts wrapped me in a fog, and the kitchen sink filled with dishes that had no right to be there, he washed them without sighs and left a note. I liked the notes more than I should have. He had tidy handwriting that made my name look important. Sometimes we fought. It is a relief to admit that. Love without friction starts to feel like a lie. We fought about small household things and gave them the weight of oceans. We fought because he could be too forgiving, which felt like abandonment to me. We fought because I wanted to leave town sometimes. Just drive until the road ended. He wanted to stay and know every crack in the sidewalk by heart. He stood still, and I mistook it for stubbornness. He mistook my restless heart for disdain. In spring, the museum asked him to give a talk about the new exhibit. He asked me to come. I sat in the 3rd row and watched him stand in front of a screen. He spoke about houses with windows that stared back. He had found the names. He said them like blessings. He did not know that 3 rows back I was crying in that embarrassed way you do when pride and pain stand side by side. Pride because he was a bright thing. Pain because I knew he would not always be mine. There is a truth about love that I wish someone had told me in words I could not ignore. You can do everything right. You can be careful and kind and steady, and still the fault line underneath will shift and swallow what you built. If you are lucky, it does not. We were not lucky. It started with a headache he could not name. It pulsed behind his right eye like a tide. He chalked it up to stress and too much coffee. He did not like doctors. He was polite to them. He said he did not want to be a patient because the word felt like a sentence. I told him I would make the appointment if he did not. He kissed my forehead and said he would call. He did not. I did. The clinic was small. The MRI was noisy. He held my hand until the nurse told him he could not take it inside the machine. He made a joke about dinosaurs so the nurse would laugh. The nurse did not laugh. We waited. When you are waiting for results, you learn a new kind of time. It melts and sticks and leaves sugar on your fingers. The neurologist had a gentle mouth and tired eyes. She used words like mass and lesion and biopsy. She said we would be careful and we would be quick, and she could not promise a good answer, only an honest one. Theo nodded in the polite way people do when they have stepped out of their bodies and are listening from a small corner of the ceiling. I sat in the chair next to him and felt the shape of my life tilt. We went home and ate cereal on the floor. It felt like college. He said he was sorry. He did not owe me an apology. I put my hand on the back of his neck and felt the heat that reminded me he was still here. We fell asleep early and woke in the middle of the night to a quiet that did not feel like our own. He asked if I believed in God. I said some days. He said the same. The biopsy came and went, sharp and unreal, like a dream where the edges are too clear. I learned the way he squeezed his eyelids when he was afraid he might cry. He learned the way I chatted about nothing when I was terrified. He let me fix him toast that he did not eat. I let him tell me a story about the first time he saw snow and thought it would sound like silk falling. It did not. He loved it. The phone call arrived on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. I was holding a dish towel in both hands as if I were praying in a religion I did not know. The doctor said the word malignant in a voice that had been taught to say it carefully. I remember staring at the window, the way the tree outside lifted its leaves to meet the light. It felt obscene that the world did not stop. I cannot tell if that is selfish or simply human. We left the apartment because the walls were listening. We walked to the pier and sat on the bench with the plaque for someone's grandfather. Theo read the plaque and said the man must have loved boats. He touched the brass like he was blessing it. He looked at me and asked me not to carry him like a secret. "Say it out loud," he said. "Say my name next to this." I did not cry on the pier. I could not find the water. He did not either. We watched the gulls and the water gave nothing back. His shoulder pressed mine. I felt a weight I did not want to be strong enough to hold. There is a way love changes when illness enters the room. It is not less. It is not more. It is something like bone. It holds even when it hurts. We learned the language of appointments. We learned to read the faces of technicians. I learned the geography of despair, where the low points were, and where you could still see the horizon. He bought me a baseball cap that said hope on it, which I hated in theory and loved in practice because he picked it out with focus I wanted to kiss. I will not give you every detail of treatment. You know how that story goes. There are good days and days with edges. There are nurses who become saints because they remember your name and the way you like your water. There are jokes that do not deserve to be funny, yet they are. There is hair on the pillow. There are afternoons that feel like mercy when nothing is on the schedule, and you can both forget for an hour. There are nights when you hate how brave you have to be for someone. There are mornings when he wakes without pain and smiles with his whole face, and you love him so hard your chest hurts. If the world were fair in a simple way, this is where I would tell you he recovered and we built a new life out of the old one, and it was not the same, but it was ours. The world is not fair in any simple way. The tumor did not care how kind he was. The tumor did not care about the names he had carried back to light. The scans turned from messy to worse. The plan turned from aggressive to maintenance to words I will not repeat. He started to miss things. He once forgot the name of the cat that wove around his ankles in the bookstore. I watched a door close behind his eyes and knew I could not follow. We did not get engaged. We did not marry. Sometimes people ask, and I see the puzzle in the question, the way they place my story among the stories they know. I do not know how to answer without a small flinch. The truth is that love is not an achievement. It is not a certificate or a ring. Those are lovely, and I do not sneer at them. I wanted 100 domestic mornings more than I wanted a ceremony. I wanted him to keep his toothbrush by my sink forever. When you cannot have a forever, you learn the price of wanting. In the last months, he woke early and sat at the window. He wrote letters. He sealed them with a cheap roll of stickers that looked like stars. He would not tell me who they were for. He was that kind of man. He did not hoard his endings. He handed them over like small gifts and trusted they would find their way. I started to notice little kindnesses I had taken for granted. He refilled the ice trays. He changed the pillowcases more often than I did, as if freshness could protect us. He pressed his palm to my back when we crossed the street, even when he was unsteady. He apologized when his hand shook and his tea spilled. I watched the person I had chosen become a smaller shape in the clothes I had loved, and I wanted to carry him around in my pocket like a lucky coin. People brought food. They said, "Call if you need anything," and I nodded because the sentence itself is a kind of help. Some of them told me about miracles. I let them. Hope is a language even when you do not believe in it. I whispered mine at night like a shy prayer and felt it fall back into my mouth. On the last morning, the lake looked like a sheet of hammered metal. The sky was white. Theo slept on his side with his hand open on the blanket like he had been offering something in his dream. I made coffee I did not drink. I listened to the radiator tick. He woke and took a slow breath that sounded like a door closing. He looked at me with wide-awake eyes, clear for the first time in days, and said my name as if he had been pushing a boat toward me and it finally reached shore. "I love you," he said. "I know," I said, which is the only answer that does not try to make a temple out of something that is already holy. He asked me to read from the maps book he bought the day we met. It was on the shelf next to the tulips he once brought in winter. I read about sailors naming stars so they could find their way home. He fell asleep while I was reading, soft and easy, and did not wake again. There are many worse deaths. There are no good ones. After the funeral, I took 3 weeks off work. I sat in the bookstore and bought nothing. The cat jumped into my lap and I cried for the first time where strangers could see me. The owner of the store sat down beside me without asking and slid a tissue box across the table. She told me she had known him as the man who always put books back where they lived. She told me that in the end, people are held by small acts that do not make it into stories. I started walking the long way to the pier. I passed the museum and pressed my face to the glass like a kid. The photos of vanished streets were still there, though someone had changed the layout. He would have complained in a soft voice if he had seen it. He cared about order. He also respected change. I tried to carry both. I found the letters he wrote the week after the funeral. They were in a canvas bag at the back of his closet under the sweater that matched fog. There were 12, one for each month of the year after he died. The first had my name. The second had the name of the bookstore owner. The third had my neighbor who brought soup spelled wrong. There was one for the cat, which made me laugh so hard I scared myself. The one for me said open on the first Sunday of each month. He could not help planning. He had not given me a ring. He had given me time. I opened the first letter on a Sunday in March. It was 4 pages. He wrote about the first night he hugged me and thought if he let go, I would fly into pieces. He wrote about the time I burned the pancakes and pretended it was intentional. He told me to replace the smoke alarm battery. He had enclosed a battery. This, I thought, is what love feels like when it is honest. It is practical and stupid and tender. It changes your smoke alarm in time. Each month he asked me to do one small thing with another person. He had written their names and why. Bring flowers to Mrs. Lopez from the 3rd floor, he said. She pretends she does not like roses, but she hoards the petals. Ask the teenager downstairs what music he listens to when no one is watching. Listen all the way through, even if it sounds like static. Write a letter to your father and ask about the day you were born. If he does not answer, write it for him. He left me a letter for December with instructions to forgive him for the thing he did not do. For not marrying me. For not leaving me sooner when he knew it would hurt. For not staying. For staying as long as he could. He asked me to forgive the tumor. I could not at first. The tumor was a thief, and I wanted to tell it so. I hated the thing without a face that had sat so close to the man I loved. Hatred is heavy. Forgiveness is not light, it is work. The letters did what he meant them to. They made me move in the world like a person again. They asked me to show up. I kept my job. I walked patients through hallways, and I said good, even when it was small. I learned that grief has a tide that pretends to be a straight line. I learned that my heart could recognize the difference between loving someone who was gone and pretending he was not. In late summer, I thought about selling the apartment and leaving town. I put the idea in my mouth like a coin and rolled it over my tongue. I thought about the lake and the museum and the bookstore and all the places that had both our shadows in them. I wanted new streets that did not remember us. I wanted old ones I could read like a map when I felt lost. I choose wrong and right every other day. That is to say, I stayed. I stayed and found new ways to be here without him. I learned to sit in the coffee shop at the table where he once set down his name on a napkin. I learned to return books on time because he would have wanted me to try. I learned that I could laugh with my whole body without betraying him. The first time it happened, at a stupid movie that did not deserve it, I looked around to see who would accuse me. No one did. Grief is crowded and private at once. It would be easy to say that someone new walked into my life and showed me that love can look different and still be true. It would be tidy. That is not what happened. I met people. I drank wine with them on porches. I liked some for an evening. I let them like me for 2. I went home and slept without placing their name under my tongue. Some mornings I woke with the shape of Theo in the crease of my pillow and said his name out loud like a key in a lock. Not because I wanted the door to open, but because I wanted to honor the door. A year after he died, I took the last letter to the pier. The plaque was warm from the sun. The lake had put on its summer face, loose and friendly. The letter was short. He thanked me for making an ending out of something that did not want to end. He told me to buy a new pair of walking shoes because I wore mine out when I was thinking. He told me to stop blaming myself for the days I resented him being ill. He told me that the measure of love is not the number of noble thoughts. It is the number of times you keep your hand on the back of someone else's neck when their skin is hot with fear. He said, "Take this year and fold it into your pocket like a map that is far too used but still gets you where you need to go." He said, "My love, I want you to walk past the museum and into the part of the city with the bad falafel, because the man behind the counter will call you sister, and it will feel like a miracle." He said, "When you meet someone kind, be kind back. When you meet someone cruel, be kind anyway. Not because it is noble, because it is easier to carry." At the bottom, he had drawn a lake. He was not good at drawing. It looked like a friendly animal with a wide back. He wrote, "Thank you for making me brave enough to be afraid. I cried then, the way you cry when you are not alone." I put the letter back in its envelope and tucked it inside the book about maps. I sat while the sun went down, and the teenagers threw pebbles into the water and counted the rings. I listened for his voice. I did not hear it. I felt it, which is not the same thing, but it is not nothing. Sometimes people ask me why I do not call him a tragedy. I suppose he is. I suppose I am. I think the word makes the ending too heavy and the beginning too light. He was my first love because he was the first person I did not try to be prettier for. He was my last pain because he taught me how to carry it with both hands, like a fragile bowl that still holds water. Here is what I want to remember. He once walked into a bookstore on a wet afternoon and caught a falling book. He said it was gravity. It was also grace. He wore sweaters that knew they were loved. He traced the names of people who had been erased and wrote them where others could see. He pressed his palm on my back when we crossed the street. He tucked a battery into an envelope because he wanted my smoke alarm to work when he was gone. He did not give me forever. He gave me this life, vivid and unprotected, and the task of living it. Now when the rain starts and the windows look like watercolor, I make tea and sit by the window. I was never a person who liked early mornings. This practice is not about liking. It is about meeting the day where it is. I keep the lake in the corner of my eye like a compass. I count the gulls. I pretend I know which one is irregular. I keep my hand open in my lap as if I am still offering him something in my sleep. At work, when a man who used to be a carpenter learns to lift his arm again past the point he feared was his last, he cries, and I do not look away. I say good. I say again. I praise the small miles. I bring him a cheap baseball cap from the hospital gift shop because the sun makes him dizzy, and his hair is not what it was. He laughs and says he will look like a boy again. I tell him yes. I tell him that is allowed. On Sundays, sometimes I go to the museum. The new director is a woman with a scarf that looks like sunrise. She has changed the exhibit again. The street with the bakery is in the corner now. The photos of the barber show his hands in motion, blur on purpose. There is a display with a case holding 3 letters that someone found in a wall when they renovated a diner. The letters are nothing special. They talk about the price of butter and how the roof is leaking and how the neighbor plays the piano at odd hours. Theo would have loved them. He loved the parts of life that do not declare themselves important. I stand and read. I say the names out loud under my breath. I imagine him beside me, the way he always stood half behind me like he wanted to give me room to arrive first. I walk out into the air and it feels like honest weather. the kind that does not make a point. The tulips at the florist stand in their buckets, leaning like friends. I buy a bundle and carry them home in the crook of my arm. I put them on the table and let them do their quiet work of being color. In the evening, I sit on the floor and eat cereal. I think about the girl I was the day we met, and the woman I am now. I do not try to decide if I am stronger or softer. I am both. I put my palm on the floor for a second and feel the steady weight of the building holding me up. I thank the shy prayer I keep in my chest. I do not ask it for anything. I let it rest. A friend told me recently that grief is a second language. At first you think you will never speak it without translating each word. Then one day you order coffee in it without stumbling. You are not fluent. You never will be. You are conversational. You can ask for what you need. You can say thank you. You can say I am lost, please point me. You can laugh at a joke you have heard before in another tongue and marvel that it still works. There is one more thing I carry, though it belongs to both of us. Near the end, he asked if I remembered that first day in the bookstore. I told him yes. He asked if I ever think about the book that fell, and what would have changed if it had not. I told him we would have met in the coffee shop anyway, that the barista would still have written Theo, and he would still have winced, and I would still have fallen in love with that wince. He smiled and said he liked that answer. He said he liked the version where there are a dozen ways for us to find each other. That is the map I keep, not the map that marks the cancer like a mountain you cannot cross, not the map with a single red line from bookstore to pier to hospital to bed. I keep the map that shows all the possible routes. I keep it folded in my pocket, soft and worn. I take it out when the morning is sharp and the wind has that lake smell like cold metal. I trace the paths with my finger, and I choose another day, another step, another small mile. I choose green tomatoes sometimes. I try to understand them. I am not finished. That is not a promise or a threat. It is the quiet truth that sits beside me when the light changes and the room shifts into evening. I am not finished. I am a woman who learned to love a man who taught her how to carry things that cannot be set down. I loved him with my whole hands. He was my first love, and he was my last pain. And both of those facts are living things that ask me, each morning, to feed them with honesty, and then go out into the day and do the ordinary brave work of being alive.